Today, I will talk about social metabolism. This is a concept to understand the connection between society and nature in quantitative terms. As a society, we depend on nature to function. Thus, social metabolism put on the spot this relationship. There are many important questions that social metabolism can help to answer in order to see better this nature society link. For example, how many natural resources are we consuming? How much of it are we releasing to the environment? What are the consequences? Also, social metabolism accounts can be related to other aspects of a society. For example, to economic accounts, demographics, and well being. Let's say X society has a high GDP, and we can ask how much of natural resources costs this GDP? Is it worth? Are the people living in better conditions? What about the future of economics and natural resources? Is it sustainable? Well, how are we going to walk through this presentation? In the first place, I want to highlight that this is a more conceptual presentation. I think this is important to understand why social metabolism is relevant. As a starting point, I will give us more brief concept of social metabolism. Then I will talk about the context behind social metabolism, which means the human nature systems. After this, I will go through the concepts of nature, society, and culture. To close everything, I will come back to the social metabolism concept to give an in depth explanation. Well, let's start. Social metabolism happens within a big context. In the first plane of the picture, we see society and nature. However, in the background, what happens is that cultural beliefs and mechanisms guide human action. Thus, our relationship with nature depends on what nature is for us and what are our goals as individuals and society. For example, many individuals want a certain kind of product, let's say laptops. This implies mobilizing a specific type of labor, knowledge, and resources for the industry to put laptops on the market. Thus, thinking in the big picture, the process of extraction, stock, and releasing of resources to nature is only one part of the picture. The other part is why we want certain goods and services and how we obtain them. Social ecology sees humans and nature systems as interacting systems. This means that they co evolve and impact mutually. Let's say agriculture. In order to produce food and fiber, we need to clear land, use water, affect biodiversity, use fossil fuels, release CO2, and so on. We need to intervene on nature. We intervene on nature. We are also impacting nature. However, there's feedback. Nature also impacts us. If we pollute the rivers, then we need to invest more in technology and facilities to have drinking water or to irrigate crops. If we pollute the atmosphere, well, global warming shows up and it causes many problems since weather perturbation, plant cycle disruptions, until massive migration. Therefore, our actions produce new regimes in nature and we need to adapt to them. We are shaping nature and nature is shaping us. Well, about nature, this is a fascinating word and concept because it has presented many meanings throughout history. Some of them include humans, while others don't. Also, every language and culture have different semantics about nature. For example, Aristotle considers nature to be the essence of things. He would say the nature of a tree is wood, while Cicero believes nature to be an initial state devoid of human influence. Moreover, the categories used to describe nature in the Western world, such as nature as a non human entity or the dichotomy of human versus the rest of nature, differ from those used in other cultures. For example, in simple terms, the Indian culture contemplates the natural phenomena as many worlds and beings that inhabit them. So, this is a great discussion. Are humans part of nature or not? And the answer to this can shape the way we act towards nature, can shape our social metabolism. In this line, we can find more insights in religions. For example, Greek and Roman gods were part of nature, like the god Pan, who lived in the forest. However, in a monotheistic context like Christianity, God is over nature. God is the creator of nature, and humans were created in the image of God. Therefore, nature is not sacred, but rather an element or resource for humans. As God, humans are over nature. This belief also resonates with the dualistic and mechanistic vision of modernity. Here is the rationale behind this belief. If nature is a creation, then there is no evolution. Nature stays in an initial state. In this sense, nature appears as a passive entity, and evolution and change come from humans under the grace of God. The human is the subject of history. So Christianity resonates with modernity, and we can say that polytheism resonates with the sustained centric view, which says that human systems are embedded in nature. This implies that humans are part of nature, not over. Moreover, the sustained centric view is linked to the social ecology's conceptual framework. Human and nature systems co-evolve and impact each other. In this view, both humans and nature represent active entities. Well, finally, what's nature? My definition of nature is based on the social ecology view. Nature is a complex system comprising the whole material reality. This means different components interact between them and there is feedback and evolution. Finally, humans comprise their own system. which is a subsystem of nature. Society is connected to nature through social metabolism and is connected to culture through communication. Culture provides a representation of nature and guides human action towards it. Culture explains or gives us a vision of life and nature. For example, culture says gold is a beautiful jewelry and it conveys that you're an important person in society. Um, we want to be important, right? So we buy gold. This interpretation of natural elements through culture provokes certain actions towards nature. In this case, gold mining, production, distribution, high class stores, and so on. Culture guides human action towards nature. Also, culture tells us that we are special. In fact, we are the dominant species of nature. It sounds so good, yes. But is that what makes us special? Hard to say. What we can say is how we manage to be the dominant species. Zifferle gives us a clue by explaining the evolutionary mechanisms. He say He says we are the dominant species of the planet because we use culture as our primary evolutionary strategy. According to Zifferle, there are two mechanisms of evolution: the organic and the cultural. Organic refers to the genetic transmission of information, which is influenced by the environment and is based on the genotype that produces phenotype. In other words, genetic evolution refers to the change in the inherited characteristics of a population over generations. One example is the evolution of the peppered moth in England during the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, the peppered moth population consisted mostly of light colored moths, which blended in well with the light colored trees and lichens in their environment, providing them with camouflage from predators. However, as industrialization spread, soot from factories darkened the trees, making the light colored moths more visible to predators and increasing their likelihood of being eaten. As a result, a genetic variation already present in the population became advantageous. A darker color variant of the pepper moth. These darker moths were better camouflaged against the darker trees and lichens, so they were less likely to be eaten by predators. Over time, the population shifted, with the darker moths becoming more prevalent as they had a higher chance of surviving and reproducing in the altered environment. This is an example of genetic evolution driven by environmental changes. Then there is the cultural mechanism of evolution. This allows the transmission of information without using the genetic mechanism. For example, the itinerary of migratory birds. Birds don't know their itinerary because of genetics. They learn it by being part of a social cultural flock. Thus, genetics is not the only mechanism of evolution, and culture is not restricted to humans. However, what's particular to us? Why are we the dominant species? Well, for human beings, culture has become the dominant strategy. Culture allows us to cooperate, and this is the key word: cooperation. We cooperate on a big scale with individuals who are not our relatives. We cooperate with people we don't know, or maybe that we never have seen in life, and we can do these thanks to culture. Through culture, fictional stories that underlie cooperation thrive, like religions, money, institutions, politics, and so on. Fictional stories. Therefore, by big scale cooperation, we are able to deal with nature in a more organized way at larger scales. We are a culturally colonized species. We depend on culture. We can cooperate by sharing common views, understandings, religions, languages, values, knowledge, beliefs, aesthetics, economy, and so on. Also, this cooperation happens in diverse ways through different cultures. People from the Christian world know very well who this guy is, and probably don't know who this other guy is. So there's a diversity of cultures across the world providing different approaches to nature. Well, coming back to social metabolism, culture explains how and why human beings intervene in nature. Remember, culture guides human intervention in nature. Culture is how humans understand and interact with the environment. Now we arrive to the definition of society, as many words, for example, nature, there are many definitions of society. The definition that I present here is in the context of social metabolism. So, society is an entity constituted by nature and culture. It's a hybrid and an autopoietic system that requires energy and materials to reproduce its biophysical structure. A hybrid and autopoietic system means that society self organizes and self reproduces. This implies that in order for society to maintain its organization, it extracts materials and energy from nature. It stocks these material and energy in the form of biophysical structure, and finally it releases them to nature again. Now I will talk more in depth about social metabolism, and also I will touch a very important tool for this concept, material flow analysis. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but this is a key tool for social metabolism, especially the quantitative part. As I mentioned before, social metabolism represents the material and energy flow between nature and society, used to support the autopoietic process of society. Thus, it provides a material and energetic perspective of the relationship between human systems and nature in quantitative terms. And here is when the material flow analysis tool MFA appears. This is a tool that quantifies the metabolic flows, also allows setting boundaries of social systems at the different scales. Let's say it allows us to study the social metabolism of a city, a region, a country, an industry, etc. Also helps to classify and measure metabolic flows, for example, in categories like biomass, fossil fuels, water, mineral resources. Also, this type of analysis enables comparisons between metabolic, economic, or well-being accounts because you have numbers, you have quantity, you have quantitative data. Geographic, this always is important to give examples. Jit Singh et al. In 2012 quantified the resource use of trajectories in India from 1961 up to 2008. The authors studied the metabolic flows based on four material groups: biomass, fossil energy carriers, ores, and industrial and construction minerals. They quantify the material use in tons per capita per year. So one can read in the paper something like this. Until the 1980s, the population grew at a slightly faster pace than domestic material consumption, DMC. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, material use remained at a low and slowly declining level of less than 3 tons per capita per year. Only since the early 1980s, a sustained growth in per capita material consumption set in, and during the last 3 decades, per, per capita material use grew by over 60% to 4.3 tons per capita per year, with growth accelerating in the last 5 years. In a few words, social metabolism studies the society's metabolic flows, which entails its biophysical structures. In this figure, we can see a model of a national economy's social metabolism. We can see that there are inputs, domestic extraction and stocks, outputs, and air and water cycles. As can be seen, and as I mentioned before, social metabolism allows setting boundaries of social systems, measuring metabolic flows, analyzing social systems at different scales, in this case, at a national scale, and also with these kind of data or model is possible to compare the social metabolism of a country in this case with its economic accounts, its public policies, and the well-being of its people. Another very interesting example comes from the research project of Professor Simron from the University of Waterloo. And this project is about social metabolism of the Caribbean islands. And the professor explains how food insecurity is related to the tourism industry, the lack of policies to support agriculture, and the type of national infrastructure built across the country. So, social metabolism using to understand food insecurity, to how is the tourism industry relate to this, related to this, or the public policies and so on. The professor also clarifies how metabolic flows can be understood as a cascade effect. During the pandemic, in the Caribbean islands, universities were shut down. After that, they didn't receive governmental support. Consequently, young people migrated looking for education opportunities, decreasing the local demographics. Thus, the government collected, in consequence, yeah, the government collected less taxes and reduced the availability of resources to invest in public policies. So, this kind of country level understanding, or in this case regional level understanding, it can be driven by social metabolism. So social metabolism related to the economy, to the public policies, and so on. Well, again, Ciferle here is helping us to understand society, in this case, from the perspective of social metabolism. According to this author, there are three main metabolic regimes: hunter gatherers, agrarian, and industrial. The hunter gatherers use or present a passive solar energy utilization. The agrarian presents an active solar energy utilization, and the industrial is fossil fuel based. In each regime, the main component is the human population, of course. Humans consume resources and produce them through labor. This is a key word also, which implies colonizing interventions in the natural resources. Colonization is also a very interesting word in here. Well, to wrap it up, we have seen concepts and definitions related to social metabolism, also some examples, and this helps to have an idea of what kind of questions social metabolism can answer. For example, it can answer questions about the metabolic historic profile of a country, or how is the metabolic flow related to the ecosystems or the metabolic regimes, or how the metabolic regime of a society is related to its well-being or to its economy, and so on. Social metabolism so is a process culturally guided and operated by human societies toward nature, in order to fill society's autopoietic needs. This process produces impacts and transformations on both systems, human and nature systems. Moreover, it implies consuming and releasing natural resources from and into nature. In this sense, social metabolism has two main components: metabolic flows and biophysical structure. Until here, so this small review of what social metabolism is. Thank you so much for your attention.